Hello everyone. In today's lesson, we will learn about how to run UFT developer tests inside containers. There are basically two modes in which you can execute your UFT developer tests inside of containers. There is the standalone mode and the execution mode. The basic difference between these two modes is that in standalone mode, the tests reside outside your container, and at the end of execution of the test, the container UFT developer container continues to run and it has to be manually shut down. Whereas in the execution mode, the tests are launched within the container, and at the end of the test, the container, UFT developer container, is automatically shut down. Let's look at the standalone mode in slightly more detail. In this mode, standalone mode, we also have two configurations in which standalone mode can be configured. One is the local mode, where you can have your tests in the same machine as your UFT developer container. In this case, the tests are the steps within your test are sent to the UFT developer container, and the steps are executed within the scope of the UFT developer container, and the results at the end of the execution come back into your test folder in your local machine. The second mode is basically the standalone mode in a remote configuration, where in this case, the tests are basically they reside in the host machine, and the UFT developer container is in a remote machine. Again, just like the previous mode, whenever your test is executed on the host machine, the commands are sent to the remote UFT developer container, and the UFT developer engine executes those commands on this container, on the application under test. At the end of the test, the results come back into your host machine and are saved there. I am now going to demonstrate how to run UFT developer tests using containers in standalone mode. Now, I'm going to use the configuration one where I described earlier. Essentially, we are going to have in our local machine a simple web test, and we will have a UFT developer container um, where the test will actually run and the results will be passed back to the local host machine. So I'm in a Linux machine. Let me start with the host name. You can see the host name is Ubuntu. The reason why I'm showing this is because when we actually run the tests, you will notice that the tests are actually running inside the container and not on the local host. So let's see what are the images that I've already downloaded. You can see I have two images here. I have the Autopass image and I have the UFT dev image. What I've already done is that I have run the Autopass container. So the Autopass container is already running, as you can see. It is up and running. What I'm now going to do is bring up the UFT dev container. So let me just explain this command of bringing up the UFT dev container. The run command is used to bring up the container in an interactive mode -it, and we are opening up the ports 5095 of the local machine, and it is opening up to the 5095 port in the UFT developer container. And this is the default port in which the UFT developer engine is listening. Then we have another port in which the VNC is configured, and this is the host machine where my license server exists. So the Autopass license server is configured on this IP, and therefore I've added the host so that UFT developer container knows exactly where to fetch the license from. You can then see the license ID and the version, which you can get from the Autopass license server, and you need to configure those values here accordingly. I'm naming my container as UFT dev Chrome because this container has UFT developer with a Chrome browser inside. And we are giving it a network to which to latch onto, right? And then it is using the image leanFT Chrome, which is exactly the image that I have here. Let's run this. Okay, looks like the container is already available, so I am going to delete this container. It's deleted, so we can run the command again. Now at this point you will find that The container is created and UFT Dev is now running in standalone mode. Let's wait for the interactive mode to actually display the log. Give it a second or two. There you go. So with this message, you can clearly confirm that UFT Developer Container is now connected with the license server and it is able to fetch the license and is now waiting for commands over the 5095 port to execute them in the container. So you can see the port is 5095 is the port in which the UFT dev engine is listening to execute the commands. You can see it's also executing in the mode, so the mode will be listed here. So if you're running it in any other mode, like the other mode is the execution mode, you can actually identify in the log here. Now that we have the UFT developer container running, let's look at a simple business flow that we will automate. What we will do is we will log into Google. We will launch the Google page, search page, search for UFT developer. And then once you are here, I want to go to the home page of UFT developer. And once I'm there, I want to do a quick checkpoint of validating the text UFT developer, right? So this is the simple test that we are going to execute. I'm going to close the browser. And here in IntelliJ, I've already created a UFT dev test, right? And this is the UFT dev test that you can see. Basically, it is the exact same steps that I showed you manually earlier. You can see I'm setting the value UFT developer in the Google Chrome in the Google homepage, and then we search for UFT developer. Then we click on the link for going to the homepage of UFT developer, and then we verify the text UFT developer. That is the simple test. And if I slightly scroll up, you can see I'm actually navigating to the google.com here, and I'm launching the Chrome, right? So these are essentially the steps that are part of my overall test. So what I can do now is execute this test, and at this point the test is actually executed, and the commands, each step within the test is actually sent through the 5095 port to the UFT developer container. And right within this container, UFT developer container, you will notice that the entire execution is happening, right? And the advantage of this standalone mode is that since the test is completely running inside the container, you will not have any interference or the browser launching in the local desktop, right? So you will not notice the entire test actually executing in this local desktop. The entire execution is happening inside the container. So let me now show you by opening another window that a new container is actually created. So you can see here, earlier we had only one container running, which was Autopass. Now we have a new container with the name that we created, UFT Dev Chrome. And the test that we just executed is running inside this container. Now that our test is executed, let's see the results. So if I just go into the run results and open this up in a browser, you can see our test has basically passed. You can see we launched the Chrome browser. We navigated to google.com and we searched for the value UFT developer. You can see the screenshot pretty much where we performed the actions on. And we have set the value UFT developer and searched for it. And once we've done the search, we've launched the home page for UFT developer. And then we've done a quick verification on the title that it is actually UFT developer that is displayed on the home page. So pretty much a very useful HTML report that is given by UFT developer that comes as an out-of-box capability. And I'd like to show you some more items in the report. Good. As you can see, the host name here, this host name is not the same host name we saw earlier. So clearly this host name tells you where this test actually ran, and that is inside the container. You would have noticed at the beginning of the demo, the local host name was Ubuntu, and you can see the host name is different. Now let's go and verify this. So if I go back, Let's launch a new window, and I'm going to show you that both the containers are running. I'm going to log into the UFT Dev Chrome container. So you are now inside the UFT Dev Chrome container, and let's type in the host name. So now you can see basically this is the container name C850 ending with 79, and that's exactly what you will find as the host name here for where your test report has been shown as the host. So you can see C8507 ending with 79. So this shows you that the entire test was run silently inside the container itself and not on the host. You never saw the browser pop up and the whole execution happen on the UI. It completely happened inside the UFT dev container in a silent mode. So clearly this is an advantage that automation teams can leverage using the UFT developer container. You will also notice that when we actually ran this, the container, UFT dev container, is still continuing to run. It has not shut down by itself. So as I told you in the standalone mode, after the test is executed, the results come back to the local machine, as you can see here, under your test folder, basically your project folder. And you can see that the UFT dev container is continuing to run. So you have to manually shut this down. So this mode, standalone mode, is great for remote execution. You can keep it running and different team members can connect to this container, a centrally hosted container or multiple such containers, and they can execute their tests. They can shut it down at the end of their test manually at a logical time. Now, this is basically the demo we wanted to show you. Now, let me also show you how do you configure the remote mode. So like I told you in the standalone mode, in the demo we have seen that the UFT developer is in the same machine as the where the tests are there in the local machine. Now in order to if you have your container in a remote machine, you have to go to your test, and if you created your UFT developer tests, it also has a file, it creates a file called leanft.properties, and you need to change the server address to an appropriate server, remote server, where the UFT developer container exists. So in this case, since my container is in the same machine as the test, you can see I have just given localhost and the port. If you were running this remotely in a remote machine where the UFT developer container is not in the same machine, it's in a remote machine, you will give the remote machine address here and the port in which the UFT developer engine is listening, right? That's all. Thank you for listening.